What's up, movie fans? And welcome to what is probably going to be the last Star Wars video that I make in 2026. Because the next two Star Wars things that I want to talk about don't come out until 2027, the Starfighter movie and Ahsoka Season 2. Which, by the way, can we talk about how ridiculous that is? Ahsoka Season 1 came out in 2023, and we're not getting Season 2 until 2027? That's a 4-year gap. Why does it take that long for TV show seasons to come out now? It's really annoying. Okay, anyway, mini rant over now. Today, I am going to be updating my ranking of every Star Wars TV show. It's been a few years since I made a Star Wars content ranking, and I'm planning on re-ranking the movies next year, so I figured this year we would do a quick ranking of all of the TV shows. Just to clarify before we start, I am only ranking the canon Star Wars shows, just the 13 canon ones. If I included the non-canon ones, then we're getting into a few shows that I haven't seen, such as the 2003 Clone Wars show, which I actually do want to watch eventually, and also the Ewoks and Droids shows from way back when, and I don't want to watch those ones. You can't make me watch those ones. Okay, anyway, let's get into the rankings, starting with number 13, the worst Star Wars show. This was actually a pretty hard decision. I went back and forth between two shows, but in the end, I decided that my least favorite Star Wars show is actually the Book of Boba Fett. This is a show that I just find to be so baffling, because if you told a Star Wars fan this premise like 10 years before this show came out, they probably would have died from excitement. Hey, in 10 years, we're going to get a Boba Fett TV show where he crawls out of the Sarlacc pit and takes over the criminal underworld of Tatooine and fights against all of these different crime syndicates, and Luke Skywalker is gonna show up, Ahsoka's gonna show up, Cad Bane's gonna show up, and Boba Fett's gonna fight him while riding a Rancor. Like, you tell a Star Wars fan all of that, that sounds insane. And then you watch the show, and it is the most boring, soulless version of that premise. Every episode in the first half of the season just lacks any energy or momentum. It's just Boba Fett stoically walking around Tatooine, getting into these silly disputes with the townsfolk, and fighting against, I don't know, the mayor and his major domo, who is supposed to be comic relief and isn't funny at all. Like, it's just such a boring show. The actual, gang war doesn't start until halfway through the season. And the other baffling thing about the Book of Boba Fett is the fact that halfway through, it ceases to be a Boba Fett show, and it instead just becomes The Mandalorian Season 2.5. And full disclosure, when it is The Mandalorian Season 2.5, it's actually pretty good. But also, I don't care. I'm not gonna give the show points because it was better when it actively focused away from its main character. And then I've also just found the finale of this show to always be so bafflingly underwhelming. The final episode becomes about this rivalry between Boba Fett and Cad Bane, two characters who we have never seen interact with each other. Like, their rivalry wasn't set up at all outside of a deleted scene from Star Wars The Clone Wars, which most people haven't even seen and don't know about. Okay, moving on. Number 12, The Acolyte. Just barely edged out the Book of Boba Fett, but these are both kind of tied. They are easily my least favorite Star Wars shows. This is a series that I was pretty excited for going into it because I thought that a lot of the ideas that they were exploring in this show sounded interesting. Like doing a murder mystery series set during the High Republic era and really diving into the Sith. Like, that sounds interesting. And then the show ended up just being super disappointing. The Acolyte is a show that is trying really, really hard to say something deep and complex about the Star Wars universe. How the Jedi and the Sith aren't actually all good or all evil. There's like a gray area in the middle there, and the Jedi are a little bit corrupt, and the Sith actually have good intentions sometimes. And that stuff is interesting on paper, but in execution, it just comes across as incredibly weird, because by the time you get to the end of the show insists to you that the character of Soul is the main antagonist of the series. Like, he's the guy who needs to be stopped, and Osha and May and the Sith Master Kamir all kind of team up and kill him in the final episode. Even though, if you actually look at what Soul does in this series to warrant being the main antagonist, it's not great. He did make mistakes, but nothing that he did was as bad as the stuff that the Sith do in this series, where they are literally murdering people throughout this entire show, most of whom are completely innocent and haven't wronged them in any way. And so it's just a very, very confusing show thematically and morally. Like, by the time you get to the end of the show, it kind of feels like the series is telling you that murder is okay, and that's a little bit strange. I also just find the writing in The Acolyte to not be that great. Like, the character of May is written very inconsistently, and it's very annoying. I've ranted about this in other videos that I've made in the past. The one thing that I think puts The Acolyte over the Book of Boba Fett is the fact that the action in The Acolyte is actually pretty cool. Like, I like what they did with this show, where they kind of mixed, like, the lightsaber combat of the prequels with, like, kung fu and martial arts. That's kind of cool. Outside of that, just a very baffling, dumb series. Number 11, Star Wars Resistance. So this is a little bit of a weird one to talk about because honestly, this show isn't actually that bad. It's just not really a show that's made for me. This is very much a kids show. Out of all of the animated Star Wars shows, this is the one that is most overtly targeted at a young audience. And I liked liked it when I was a little bit younger, but now that I'm older, it just hasn't stuck with me. Like, it doesn't have the same power as Clone Wars, Rebels, or Bad Batch, where you can watch those shows as kids and still like them when you get older. With Resistance, this is kind of just a kids show. And I think it's fine. Like, it doesn't do anything that's insulting to me. I actually do remember really enjoying a lot of episodes of this show when I first watched it when I was like 12 or 13. But now it's just kind of meh, like I don't really have any strong feelings on it. So yeah, that's why this one is ranked lower on the list. Number 10, Obi-Wan Kenobi. An incredibly disappointing Star Wars Disney Plus series. I think in order to really understand why Kenobi doesn't work, you kind of have to talk about the backstory of this show. This show was originally intended to be a movie. Like, it was originally supposed to be a Star Wars story movie, and then Solo flopped at the box office, and as a result, they canceled all of the future Star Wars story movies and decided to turn this into a TV show. The original movie was supposed to be about Obi-Wan Kenobi having a rematch with Darth Vader between the events of Revenge of the Sith and A New Hope. And when this show focuses on that, it's actually really good. Like, when this show focuses on kind of like Obi-Wan's guilt over failing Anakin and Anakin turning to the dark side, that stuff is really interesting. I think Ewan McGregor's performance is really good. Vader is just as menacing as ever in this show. But the problem is the show doesn't just focus on Obi-Wan and Vader. In order to make this a TV show, they had to pad out the runtime with a bunch of other stuff, and so the show focuses a lot on this Inquisitor, Reva, who, I'll admit, I actually do think is an interesting character, but it just feels like her involvement in the series is taking so much focus away from Obi-Wan and Vader, which is where the focus of the story really should be. And then they also add Leia into this series to kind of give Obi-Wan a reason to leave Tatooine, and they have her get captured, and so Obi-Wan has to go and save her. And then, halfway through the show, Leia gets captured again, and Obi-Wan has to save her again, and it's just incredibly obvious that they had to add another Leia getting captured and rescued plotline to extend the story of the show for longer. And then the other thing that's really a problem with Kenobi is that a lot of the directing and writing in this show is just bafflingly stupid, where there are just like chase sequences in this show that look awful and have straight up cartoonish logic, and then there's also like characters who get stabbed in this show and just walk it off like it's nothing. And then there is a scene in this show where Obi-Wan, while trying to escape an Imperial base with Leia, does so by hiding Leia under his trench coat. And that is an actual thing that is supposed to be taken seriously in this series. So yeah, just a very disappointing series. It's not the worst thing ever. It has redeeming qualities, but it is definitely on the lower half of this list. Number 9. This is actually a 3-way tie between the 3 Tales of shows. If you don't know what these are, essentially in 2022, Disney Plus started making these Star Wars anthology shows all about different characters from different factions in the Star Wars universe. So first they made Tales of the Jedi, then they made Tales of the Empire, and then they did Tales of the Underworld. Each of these shows are 6 episodes long, and they kind of divide their focus between 2 characters each of whom get 3 episodes. And I think all of these 3 shows so far have all been fine. Like, they're just these fun little shows in the Star Wars universe that add a little bit more depth to characters who don't really get a lot of focus in other Star Wars media. But outside of that, I don't know, they've just never really stuck with me that much. They're just kind of there. I think of these 3 shows, the best story that we have gotten so far is easily the Count Dooku storyline in Tales of the Jedi, which I think added so much more depth to the character of Count Dooku and made him a way more interesting villain than he has ever been before. Outside of that, I don't know, I like the Cad Bane stuff in Tales of the Underworld. That's kind of it. Like, there's not really any other stories in these shows that really, like, stand out to me that much. They're enjoyable in the moment, but they're kind of forgettable after you watch them. They're not bad. This is just kind of where they ended up on the list. Number 8, Ahsoka. Okay, so this is one of the most interesting shows on this list to talk about to me. I think that a lot of people don't really like Ahsoka anymore. Like, this show was pretty well received when it first came out, and since then, people have kind of turned on it. In my opinion, I still like it. I think Ahsoka is a good show, but over time, I have realized that it does have a few pretty big problems. The main one is that I think that the show lets Sabine off the hook way too easily. We're like halfway through this show, Sabine makes the decision to give the map to the other galaxy to Baylan, which is a very selfish decision that kind of screws over the main characters of this show. And she's never really called out on how selfish that is. Like, in the second half of the show, nobody ever acknowledges it. Like, Ahsoka just tells her, yeah, you kind of screwed up a little bit, but we found Ezra in the end, so it doesn't really matter. Like, that shouldn't really be the way that people are reacting to that. So I think that is the main problem that I've kind of developed with this show over time. I also have other little nitpicks. Like, I think that Sabine surviving getting stabbed early on in this show is a little bit silly. I think that Sabine and Ezra's reunion with each other should have been a way bigger deal than it is made out to be in this show. The show should have been animated. Like, that's just obvious. I don't know why they chose to make this show live action. It is the sequel sequel to multiple animated shows. Like, why wasn't it animated? But outside of that, I still enjoy Ahsoka. It is this classic Star Wars series about Ahsoka and Sabine, a master and an apprentice, kind of trying to understand each other over the course of the show, learning all of the different ways that the two of them are similar, all of the different ways that the two of them are different, and I think that all of that is really, really interesting. I like Ahsoka's arc in this series, where at the start of the show, she is kind of presented as cold and distant because of all of the grief and guilt that she is feeling over what she learned about Anakin in Rebels, and she ends up becoming more like regular Ahsoka by the end of the series, and I really like that. I like the way that this show continued all of the different character arcs and storylines from Star Wars Rebels. I liked the way that each of the actors played their characters from Rebels. So yeah, I think overall Ahsoka is a good show, and I do think a lot of the hate that this show gets now is a little bit overblown. Number 7, Skeleton Crew. I think Skeleton Crew is honestly just a really, really fun Disney Plus series that more people need to give a chance. This show is easily the least watched Star Wars show. Like, it did not do well on Disney Plus, and that really is a shame, because I think this series is just a really, really cute, family-friendly adventure series in the Star Wars universe. It is very much the Goonies meets Star Wars, as you have this group of kids going on this adventure, pirates and treasure, elements like that, and it is just a really fun show that wears its influences on its sleeve, and I really enjoyed it. I think the best element of this series is Jod, played by Jude Law. I think he is genuinely one of the best Star Wars villains that we have gotten in recent years. I think that he is a very compelling, fun, menacing villain. And then I also just find the kids to be really endearing, entertaining protagonists. And it's really fun to follow them on this journey. And so, yeah, it's not a show that's going to blow your mind or anything, but I think Skeleton Crew is a ton of fun, and I'm really sad that this show did not do well when it came out. Number 6, The Bad Batch. Of the long-running Dave Filoni animated Star Wars shows, I think The Bad Batch is easily the weakest, but that's kind of saying a lot about how good the Dave Filoni animated Star Wars shows are, because this is still a really, really good show. I think the most interesting thing about Star Wars The Bad Batch is the era that it is set in, where this show is set right after the Clone Wars, so it's kind of in that transitional period where the Republic has fallen and the Empire is taking over the galaxy. And I think that that is a really interesting time frame to explore. I think that the way that this show kind of addresses things like How did the Empire go from using clone troopers to stormtroopers? And how did the Empire start, like, taking over all of these planets and phasing out the Separatist Alliance? And all of these other things. I think all of that is very interesting to explore. And it's especially interesting to explore from the perspective of clones. Like, that's another thing that I really like about The Bad Batch. Like, choosing to explore this era from the perspective of a clone squadron was a stroke of genius, since the clones were created for the Clone Wars. So when the Clone Wars is over, what are they supposed to do? Like, what is their new purpose in the galaxy? I think all of that is really interesting. The other thing about The Bad Batch that really works is just the fact that the characters themselves are a ton of fun to spend time with. I think that all of the Bad Batch members are very fun and unique in different ways. Every time I ask someone who's watched this show who their favorite member of the team is, they have a different answer. And I think that says a lot about how fun the characters are in this series. Number 5, The Mandalorian. It's a show where I kind of feel like, to talk about it in depth, I have to go season by season. I think season 1 of The Mandalorian is just a fantastic first season of television. It has this very simple yet effective premise about this ruthless Mandalorian bounty hunter having his heart melted by this little baby and risking his life to protect this child. And through that premise, you are able to just have this season that has an overarching storyline about the Mandalorian getting attached to this child and protecting him. But it's also a season that is able to do really, really fun standalone episodes about the Mandalorian just going on these fun bounty hunter adventures. And when I first watched this show, back when it first came out, I didn't like that. I saw those, like, adventure episodes as being filler, but now that I'm older, I kind of recognize, no, that's just kind of the type of show that this is. Like, you could have these fun little episodic serialized adventures, and that's a lot of fun. So I really like season 1 of The Mandalorian. In my opinion, and this is a hot take, season 2 is better. Like, I really like season 2 of this show. I think it has a more compelling overarching storyline about the Mandalorian trying to get the child to a Jedi. And then through that storyline, you are able to have a lot of really, really cool cameos from other Star Wars characters. And while at times it does feel like it's pandering to Star Wars fans and going deep into fan service, I still think all of the cameos feel very natural, and it builds to this very profound emotional conclusion where the Mandalorian and the child part ways, and it is just a perfect 2-season run of television. Season 3 of The Mandalorian kinda sucks. Season 3 of this show just exists to undo everything that the first 2 seasons did, where, nope, never mind, the Mandalorian spent an entire season trying to get the child to a Jedi for no reason, because now Grogu just wants to go back home, so he goes back to the Mandalorian. And nope, never mind, the fact that the Mandalorian got the Darksaber doesn't matter, because Bo-Katan Bo-Katan just gets it back on a technicality, and the fact that Moff Gideon was defeated doesn't matter because he just breaks out of prison. Like, it is just such a baffling misfire that really did bring the show down a lot, in my opinion. I'm not kidding here. If we were just talking about the first 2 seasons of The Mandalorian, top 3. No joke, it would be top 3 on this list. But we're not just talking about the first 2 seasons, and so it has to come down to the top 5, which is still pretty good, but it could have done better. Number 4, the newest Star Wars show, Maul Shadow Lord. We only have 1 season of this show so far, so this placement is subject to change. It is possible that season 2 could completely ruin everything and bring it down on this list, or season 2 could be amazing and bring it up on this list. But for now, I do think Maul Shadow Lord earned its place in the top 4 on this list. This is a series that is just so cool in so many different ways. The first half of Maul Shadow Lord is kind of this crime series in the Star Wars universe where it's all about Darth Maul, who is this outlaw, kind of like going on this mission where he's getting revenge on all of these different crime syndicates and he's fighting all of them. And then you have a cop thrown into the mix who is trying to catch him, Captain Lawson, and it is this awesome cat and mouse chase. And then you have other characters thrown in there like Devin and Master Daki, and it's all just a very, very compelling crime thriller series. And then, when you get into the second half of this show, it goes from being really good to suddenly just being one of the most intense seasons of Star Wars television that has ever been made, where the Empire shows up and suddenly Maul has to team up with all of his enemies and they all have to go on the run from the Empire, and it's like this intense fight for survival. And I just really loved everything that this season did. It made an amazing first impression, and I am very excited to see where the show goes from here. The finale of this show was just so cool, and I'm really excited to see how the story continues. Number 3, Star Wars Rebels. Rebels is a show where, I'm gonna be honest, I always have a really hard time talking about it in ranking videos like this, because with most of the shows on this list, I can talk for a really long time about what makes them great or what makes them bad. But with Rebels, the fact is, everything about what makes this show great is pretty simple. It's just a really, really good show with a really, really good story populated by characters who are really, really likable and fun to spend time with. And that's really everything that makes Rebels work. It is just a really compelling series about this boy who's felt abandoned his entire life, joining this team of rebels who are up against the entire Empire and just becoming a part of their family. And I think throughout its 4 seasons, it manages to just be such a fun, emotionally resonant series. I think the characters in this show are some of the best characters in all of Star Wars. And I mean that with all of them. Like, the entire Ghost crew, I just find to be so lovable. They are such a fun main cast to spend time with, and I really, really enjoyed them. And then the show also has amazing villains, like the Grand Inquisitor, Grand Admiral Thrawn, and then like other villains like Vader and Maul who end up coming into the mix. And then the show also is able to continue a ton of different plot lines from Clone Wars, where you get Ahsoka in there and Rex, and you kind of continue their storylines. And so, yeah, I think Rebels is just a really, really special, simple, fun animated Star Wars show that has stuck with me for a long time, ever since I first watched it. But there are two shows that I think are just a little bit better than it. And these next two shows were really, really hard to choose between, because honestly, these next two are two of my favorite TV shows of all time. With that being said, number 2 is Star Wars The Clone Wars. This was previously my favorite Star Wars show, but it has been dethroned. It's still a masterpiece. I absolutely love The Clone Wars. I think this is an incredible animated series with so many layers to why it is as good as it is. This is a show that was made to kind of fill in the gaps of the Star Wars prequel trilogy, where this was made to kind of show us the war that happened in between the events of Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith. And in the process of doing that, this show, bizarrely enough, ended up being better than the Star Wars prequels, where it actually elaborates a lot on a lot of the plot lines that the prequels were trying to do, and does them a lot better. Where you watch this series and suddenly you understand Anakin Skywalker as a character so much more. You understand why he became disillusioned with Jedi and why he felt like he had to turn to the dark side. You understand his relationship with Obi-Wan way more, his relationship with Padme way more. The show takes villains from the Star Wars prequels and develops them more and makes them more interesting, like Count Dooku and Darth Maul. Maul, in particular, this show turned him into one of the best villains in the entire franchise. And then along with that, there's also just a ton of great original ideas in this series where you get amazing new characters like Ahsoka, Rex, Cad Bane, Ventress, who have just gone down in history as iconic Star Wars characters because of how amazing they were in this series and how like instantly likable and iconic they were. Ahsoka in particular is genuinely my favorite character in all of Star Wars now, and she originated from this show. And then this is also a show that has kind of an anthology format where you're exploring different story arcs every few episodes. So as a result, this is a series where some of the story arcs are weird, like really, really weird. And if you hear them or see them on paper, they sound insane. Like, what? We're going to do a 3-episode arc where Anakin, Ahsoka, and Obi-Wan get trapped in this weird Force realm, and there's a bunch of, like, Force gods there. Or what? We're going to do an arc where Obi-Wan fakes his death and disguises himself as a bounty hunter. Like, you hear those and they sound so weird and outlandish, and then you see them and they're the coolest thing that you've ever seen. And that is the power of Star Wars: The Clone Wars. It does have problems. Not every story arc in this series is a hit. Like, some of them do kind of suck, and I think that's what brought it down to number 2 for me. It's the fact that it's not as consistently great as my number 1 pick, but still, I think The Clone Wars is an amazing animated series. But coming in at number 1, Andor. Andor has officially dethroned The Clone Wars as my favorite Star Wars show. I think Andor is just a masterpiece. I have talked about this show extensively in the past, but just summarizing what I love about it. Andor is a series that takes the central conflict that has been a part of Star Wars since the beginning, all about a rebellion standing up to an evil empire, and it takes a look at it on a deeper level. It asks why. Why would a person stand up to an oppressive force that they have absolutely no hope of defeating? What drives a person to make that choice? And it is able to explore that theme excellently throughout the 2 seasons, and it is able to just be this compelling adult drama series in the Star Wars universe, where it takes a look at the Star Wars galaxy from a more realistic lens. It explores all of these different planets and how they work, how their societies work, how their cultures work, and then it shows you the Empire coming into those planets and just destroying them. And through that, it is able to get you more invested in its characters than I think any other Star Wars show is able to get you. And you just really, really want to see them stand up against the Empire and bring them down. This show is able to create a version of the Empire that is way more hateable than anything we've ever seen before, and a version of the rebellion that you want to see succeed way more than you have ever wanted to see them succeed before. And along the way, you just have amazing characters like Cassian, Luthen, Mon Mothma, Cyril, Dedra, Bix, all of whom are just amazing characters and are some of my favorite characters in the Star Wars universe now. You're able to have just crowd-pleasing moments that are so satisfying and memorable. And I think as good as Clone Wars is, I think Andor managed to make me feel more attached to the Star Wars galaxy than I would say any other project has ever made me. And as a result, it is my favorite Star Wars TV show. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, leave a like and subscribe. Comment down below, what is your favorite Star Wars show? And see ya, movie fans.